Thanks, everyone. This is the Ask April and Cindy series, and I'm April.
And I'm Cindy, and this is the first of our series of travel tips, so welcome.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And tonight, this is our travel skills and tips series, and we're talking about traveling with others.
Yeah, welcome. So let's just jump in, April, and talk about traveling with others. There's so many different ways that you can travel with other people. It can be anything from a trip that you've planned with a girlfriend or a partner, or joining a group tour. And sometimes that is a problem, and sometimes it's wonderful. So we just want to, kind of go over some of the things you can do ahead of time and maybe put your head in the right space so that you can make that experience the best it can be.
Right.
So I know we talked about the first thing is to kind of share and walk through your travel style. So how you travel, and I think that's the first thing most people think about is I want to travel with somebody who travels like me.
Right. And sometimes you can choose that. I know we were chatting earlier. You can go looking for that particular type of travel. Like if it's a group and you have an interest in, say, architecture, you could do a group tour that's architecture focused. I know the LA Times, you might be able to meet other people via Meetup or a Facebook group or a photography club. I mean, there's clubs now for every interest out there. But other times, as we all know, maybe you've joined a family trip and there's just different dynamics. I know I did a bus trip last year, which is totally out of my realm. 40 people, some family members, some not. So some of these tips are really important in those situations to kind of set boundaries and, and to you still want to have the best trip possible. I mean, everybody wants to just have a good time in the end.
Right. I mean, so some of the things about like the style is like, we were talking earlier, like, are you an early riser? Do you get up early or do you stay up late? Understanding your partner. So let's just start with, let's assuming that the people are planning a trip with a friend or a family members.
Right.
Because when you do it on a group tour, you don't have that ahead of time,
right.
Where you can have those conversations. But if you have the luxury of having that, talking ahead of time before you're on the trip, right?
Right.
Finding out, at least understanding whether or not, again, they're an early riser. Are they really wanting to be active? Like, how much of that kind of stuff do they want to do? Do they need their own time? How long does it take them to get ready in the morning? I mean, I know some people travel, and I mean, I'm one of those people. Like, when I travel, I rarely put makeup on. I rarely spend much time getting ready because I do less when I travel than I do when I'm at home, because I actually just want to take advantage of the time that I'm there. But that doesn't mean I'm doing nothing. And some people will do absolutely nothing. So it depends on, how you feel about the travel, and then giving that your partners some space to do what they need to do.
Right. And I think that's important. If you're sharing a room with someone, and maybe it's someone you've just met, maybe it's a relationship or even a friend. Oftentimes you see a friend week after week, but to finally plan a trip together. And oftentimes it is cost effective to share a room. We all know that. But if you need to have that discussion ahead of time, because you could really have some, hurt feelings or just some clashes that could have been avoided, I feel, for both people ahead of time. Like you mentioned, like, do you take a shower in the morning? Are how long does it take you to get ready? Some people need a lot of, like me, I need a lot of kind of like, I want my space in the morning. I'm kind of slow. So it's like, if we're going to leave the hotel at 10 to go to a museum, or we both want to go to X place together, I know I need to set my alarm at this time. And is that going to bother this person? Is my roommate going to leave the TV on all night? You need to discuss those things.
Yeah. And you were just talking about getting up in the morning. I mean, I'm a breakfast person. I almost always eat breakfast in the morning. And so I need time for that. So and when I'm traveling with other people, even if we're sharing a room, I might get up extra early, get myself ready, and then go get something to eat. And that's totally fine with me if my partner, the person I'm traveling with, wants to sleep in. They just have to be respectful of the fact that I may, bumble around the room a little bit as I'm getting ready. I'll try to be quiet and get out of the room so that they can continue to sleep if they're just a get up and go kind of person. And I don't necessarily need them to have breakfast with me. I think that's one of the things that is really important when you're traveling with other people, is to give the rest of the folks on your group tour, whether it's your family or someone you're sharing a room with, a little room to do it their way, right? So if they're not breakfast people, you don't have to come down and eat breakfast. That's just what I'm going to do. And you don't have to get up and do that with me. And the same thing with like going out at night. So some people want to go out in the evening, but that is absolutely something you need to talk about ahead of time, is what your expectations are around. And I think the things we've talked about already is like your sleeping style, when you get up or stay up late, how active they want to be, whether they want to go out and if they're interested in walking and hiking, or they're going to need to take a taxi everywhere. There's a lot of differences in activity style, right? Another thing that has run me into problems on occasion is a budget style.
Yeah, I was just going to mention money, and money should be discussed. I know a lot of people have told me, like, so-and-so and so-and-so are really good friends, but they've just, they don't travel together because one person has more to spend or has budgeted more to spend, and the other person has chosen to spend less on travel. And that's perfectly fine, but that needs to be discussed often ahead of time before you get into the travel situation, before you're walking into a restaurant or putting someone in an uncomfortable situation that, hey, here's this great place I found, and everything on the menu is like, wow, your eyes are bugging out.
Right. Yeah. And I have had that where I went with friends and, they want to go see an event or do something. And the response is, oh, it's okay. It's once in a lifetime. It's okay if it's, a $300 ticket. We're just going to spend it. But for me, it's like, no, it's not. That's not something I want to do. And again, you really need to be understanding that it doesn't matter about whether you have the money or you don't have the money to spend. It's sort of a style thing, is whether or not that's something you're interested in doing. So being aware of how you want to spend your money on your travel, and being aware of what's important to each other, so there isn't sort of that pressure, because I've definitely had that happen to me a couple of times where travel partners have said, oh, come on, it's just, it's a one-time thing. So what if it's more? We can do that. But you have to, I think the other, and I said it before, the important thing is that if you don't agree, that it's okay to do it separately, right?
Exactly. And I think once you discuss that ahead of time, everybody goes into the experience with a good sense of feeling of how it's going to go, and a sense of then that time that you do spend together. Maybe you're meeting for lunch. You each do an activity on your own, say in the morning, and meet up at lunch, or meet for dinner, or even just in the evening. Sometimes roommates just are roommates, and then you have that great chat at the end of the night, like, hey, what did you do today? What did you see? So I think there's no right or wrong to any of this by any means. It's just being open to share what your style is, and know that it's your style, own it. And
right.
We often say, just own it and be comfortable that this is who you are and how you like to do things. And your time is valuable. So it's important that everybody enjoy these experiences.
Yeah, and I think with that note, I think one of the things that helps me when I'm planning a trip with either a family member or people that we're going to be together the whole time, it helps me if I plan or tell them ahead of time that I want to spend this amount of time by myself. Even if I really don't need it or want it, sometimes it's just nice that we had that conversation ahead of time, and now I am going to take this afternoon, to just sort of do things by myself, so that I can now, regroup and feel better about when we're together. So sometimes just planning alone time in the middle of your trip is helpful. One, it sets a stage for the next time you want to do it, or that it's okay to do. But you may not even realize that they're starting to, irritate you or frustrate you. And then you get an afternoon to yourself and you're like, oh, I feel so much better. And now I can go back with a fresh head. I think, just doing that ahead of time is helpful. Again, setting the stage too, that you can, I don't want to do that. It's okay. You guys go do that. I'm going to go do something else. And that should be okay on your group trips as well.
Right. Yeah.
And then I was also thinking about safety issues, because we talked about going out at night.
Right.
And I think especially for women, a big portion of the reason we travel with others is because we feel safer when we're with another person. So I think that's something that we need to talk about ahead of time, is if you feel unsafe being out by yourself, then you absolutely need to be sure you're comfortable with the person you're traveling with, because you're going to have to be with them the whole time.
Right.
And maybe there's something to think about, having a couple of other people along so that you can partner with these two and then not this one, and just sort of split up a little bit. That does add a little room in your trip, especially if it's a long trip. So you're not with the same people for 8 or 9 days. Yeah, depending on how long it is.
And as far as planning together, I know there's a lot of now apps on the internet. If people are working on a trip together where you're both wanting to have input, I think it's important to maybe split the responsibilities. That way each person feels they have some input as you're planning together. You know, just like Paul, I thought it was lovely. We've been talking to so many travelers and couples, and sometimes one person says, well, I let them pick the hotels, so to speak, or then we look at them together, or one person chooses activities. So, you know, working together, I think it's important to incorporate both, you know, interests, but then also it's very important to allow time apart, or, you know, one person needs some downtime, like, hey, I don't go out at night, so you go do your thing, and I just want to sit and read a book in the room or go to bed early, or whatever they need to do. It's okay.
Right. And when you bring up planning, I think that another thing I've heard some of these challenges, and I don't know if I've actually had this experience because I'm a bit of a planner myself, but I know other folks get frustrated when the partner is like, oh, I don't care, I'll just do whatever. And they allow the partner to do all of the planning. There's sort of this decision fatigue that happens. You know, you're like, God, I have to make all the decisions. Do we go here? I had to look up everything. So really digging in yourself and taking some responsibility for the planning, even if your friend or partner is saying, I've got it. I mean, take a few minutes and look at their plans before you go, so you're not surprised. I've heard stories about that, like, oh, I didn't know that this is what we were going to go do, but that's because I spent no time ahead of time looking at the plans, and I was comfortable at one point with letting you plan the whole thing, and now that we're on the trip, I'm not happy with what we're doing. That's really unfair. And, you know, like, look into the stuff, even though they say, oh, this is going to be a lot of fun. Like, do your own research, check out the museum, look at the restaurant reviews, just say, oh, you know, there's nothing on this menu that I like, so I'm not sure this is a great restaurant for me. I mean, there's lots of that you have to take responsibility a little bit of what's happening on your trip. And I think that is similar to when you're on a group tour, right? If you don't know what's happening.
Yeah. And it is important to, if you're traveling with friends, to take the responsibility. Don't just put it all on one person, even though maybe you don't want to spend all the time on the internet, but at least for the respect of your friend that you're traveling with, and and also it's going to make the trip better for you if you take a few minutes and look over what they've planned, and even if you just look up a few of the things, because you don't want to be the person later that's like, well, why did you pick that? You know, I don't like X, Y, or Z, or I can't go bicycling for 30 miles, or, you know, at that point, you got to just shut up. You
too late.
It's not fair. It's too late.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that on trips that I've actually organized for groups, where I've had people, you know, I do the work ahead of time, and you publish the agenda of what you're planning to do. And then it's always amazing to me that somebody will show up on a 5-day trip and go, oh, we're doing that? I'm like, oh, I've been telling you, like, it's in every email, we're doing this, you know, and I told everybody yesterday, and then we show up so you're not even reading the agenda or paying attention to the itinerary of what we're planning to do. So it feels really disrespectful to me, who's organized the trip. But then, of course, they end up being unhappy because there's a whole, like, half day of the trip that they didn't want to do that. And had they known that, and had I known that, I might have said, oh, well, you don't have to join the group during this time. Here's another option for what you can do with your time, and help them plan that better. So it's, you know, in your own interest to be very aware of what's happening on the trip, both what's getting planned, and if you're on a group trip, like taking an active role and looking at what the itinerary is, and speaking up, right, if it doesn't match with what you're
Right.
expecting or what you're wanting.
Right, exactly. So have you used any of the, there's some apps out there now. I know, like I've mentioned roadtrippers.com, which is an excellent site. I looked at it again today, where you can easily share online. I know you've used a few, I think, Cindy, with groups, or Prep a Trip. That was one, right?
Prep a
I
Trip
don't know
is
how
really
that,
more for camping, or
I guess it would work for a road trip, maybe.
yeah, the real benefit for Prep a Trip is being able to do things like potluck or group,
Okay.
like if you're doing group equipment, I guess that's the best description, right? Like if you, everybody doesn't need to bring all their own stuff, as well as they do carpooling and that kind of stuff, so you can identify, and you can also do leading different things. So that is a really good site. It just isn't set up for one specific thing. But any of these online sharing capabilities.
There's a lot of like apps. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I even noticed TripAdvisor, I think, has added a section for people to plan together and then create a private place so that just who you invite can view it, which is kind of nice. And, with TripAdvisor, you're tied right in then to reviews. So you could easily, if your planning friend had suggested X places to stay, you could quickly look up reviews on your own. I know sometimes money at restaurants, at meals, can also be a time where, everybody, oh, let's just order together and share, which it is. It's wonderful, believe me, to share different dishes so you can taste everything. But then you get where the check comes in, and sometimes nobody thinks to ask the waiter or waitress to split it ahead of time. So I know there's also little apps, like one's called splitwise.com, and it looked like right from that app you could split it up and people could Venmo and share, equally split it if you were doing an equal split. But those are things just to keep in mind too.
Yeah. I think that the eating and the food is you're always wanting to share that, and having some expectations, again, asking those questions ahead of time about what kind of food that person likes to eat, how much money they like to spend on food. And now that we're on that topic, the other thing that I've encountered are shoppers that I travel with. So I'm not a shopper. I don't typically spend a lot of money on things when I travel. It's just not my thing. But I know that a lot of people want to go shopping. They want to bring things back. It's very important that they stop at these places and they have a list of things, sometimes in different locations, that they want to purchase. And if that's your thing, that's something to make sure you've talked about, that you don't want to spend. I don't like to spend my afternoon shopping. Like I don't mind walking through a market for the cultural experience, and especially if it's food related, because I get to eat that, but I'm not planning to spend hours and hours doing that. And I know we just talked to a couple that went on a brewery tour. So those kinds of things are probably important to kind of get ahead of time. Like I would like to spend more of my time on food or more of my time on shopping, and understanding that kind of comes back to the style question. But knowing what your friends and partners are interested in doing when they travel, and either planning that together or giving them room, right, to do that on their own, so they can still get the best experience with their time.
Right.
I know we talked about, preserving the enjoyment of your trip. And I know you said earlier, April, about owning it. And I think that that's something that we all need to remember, is that it's everyone's trip, right? Everyone's taken time off work.
Right.
Everyone's put money into this. Everyone's probably put some time into it. And so, just remembering that you're not the only one on vacation, and you're not the only one trying to get enjoyment, and giving your friends room, but also remember that it is your time. So you can say, no, I don't want to spend 2 of my days doing X, right? I have only 5 or 6 days, so 2 of them can't be here. So it matters.
And I think that's ultra important about owning it, and preserving the enjoyment of your trip. But to also, if you've signed up for a group trip too, you have that same responsibility to all the other people in a group. I know we've chatted a couple times. We've all been in a group situation where there's somebody that's, something's not to their expectations. And maybe it was because they didn't take the time, honestly, ahead of time to ask the right questions. And as a tour leader too, I'd so much rather you ask me ahead of time, a month ahead of time, whenever you signed up for the trip and got the itinerary, ask questions. If there looks like there's a hole in there, or you brought up the shopping, which is excellent, because a lot of times on my trips where I'm focusing on nature or photography, I'm not even thinking about shopping, to be honest. And if you thought, oh, I'm going to have a few minutes to dash and get a souvenir or something, sometimes the shops close early in these little towns or anywhere.
Right.
Some countries, Sunday, businesses are closed. So, as a courtesy to your tour leader or the rest of the group, be sure and ask, like, hey, is there an opportunity for me to shop? Will there be a town? Ask those questions, please. It's even on a group, because you don't want to be the one person in the group that everyone's, that you're the one person that has different expectations than the other people. It's not good for you. You're going to be unhappy and not have the best trip possible, and you're also impacting all the other people on the group as well, who are just trying to enjoy their trip too.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely important, especially on a group tour. When you're on a group tour where there's, especially if you haven't organized it and you just paid your fee and you're kind of going along, well, that's what you're doing. You're going along, right? And it's really very hard as a tour leader to have someone, one, not read ahead of time, and they have no idea what we're doing today, and then they're going to complain about doing it. And it's like, okay, that's frustrating. And then also, if you don't want to do this one thing, it's okay not to do it. 90% of the time, it's okay to either stay back in your room or choose to do something else. But don't make a big fuss about that. I've had people do that, which is very frustrating. If we're all going to go do this tour and somebody says, I've had enough walking yesterday and today I just can't do the walking tour, so I'm going to choose to stay back. Making a big fuss about that and letting everybody know you're doing that, as a tour leader, I felt like, okay, now you're making everybody else feel like we're doing too much walking, and you're making everybody else feel like it's, that what we're doing is wrong or we shouldn't be doing it. It would have been a lot better for me had they just come up to me personally, said, I'm going to stay in my room because I'm just a little tired, and kind of quietly stepped aside and let us continue on with the trip. So there are some of that, just sort of respecting that everyone else isn't you. But as a tour leader, I don't know how other folks, I know you and I, April, feel the same way. If you don't want to go or it's not for you, we'd much prefer you just to stay back and hang back and do what makes you happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You don't have to do everything with the whole group all the time. But on the same note, if you don't do anything with the group, and I've had that happen, then I question why you're coming. Right. So if you bow out of everything, like, oh, I don't want to do that. I was like, okay, we were doing 4 days in this place and you've chosen not to do anything with the group. It feels like, well, maybe you should have just bought a plane ticket and done it on your own.
Right. So, planned your own trip.
Yeah. But in that case, I think that person was looking for travel partners. So they came along, they liked the idea. But there's another way to do that. As you said, there's other ways to find travel partners besides going on a group tour. And there are group tours, I think, that are sort of laid back as well, where it's just
exactly.
even and easy to do. And we talked briefly before this about having an escape plan.
Right.
And especially on a long trip, I think it's important that you understand where your boundaries are. Like, if this is really not working for me, am I okay just kind of stepping away? And especially early on, and we talked about it as tour leaders, if in the first day or two this is just not for you, it's okay if you let us know that and kind of want to break away. There's probably an opportunity to give you a refund or a partial refund on the trip if you're not interested in continuing. It's much better to walk away from a bad experience that isn't meeting your needs than it is to stay and complain and be miserable. And you're not only ruining your week, but you're ruining everybody else's. So just kind of, it's okay to own up that I made a mistake and this isn't for me. I don't know how you feel about that. April.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely agree. It is good to think through in your head, especially if you've signed up for a group tour, to have an escape plan, because even if you've answered all the right questions and you think it's checked all the boxes, I mean, I've had similar situations where, yes, it's a photography trip, but even in a photography trip, there's different styles of photography trips. There's different styles of architecture tours or city tours, or for any tour, there's different styles and people on that trip. And if it's not meeting your needs and you're in the first day, the first 24 hours, by all means, if you like what am I willing, what is my boundary? Am I willing to just be quiet and, okay, I made this mistake, but I'm going to try to be, go along with the group. Okay, but then you need to personally make that choice and do the best you can, or set up an escape plan, as I said, and tell your group leader, pull them aside and say, hey, you know what? This trip isn't what I expected. I'm not getting out of it what I thought I would. So is it possible? I realize there's a bus or there's a way to get back to the airport, whatever it needs to be. It helps if you as an individual have already kind of investigated what that escape plan might look like. And then to pull your tour guide aside, it's much better for the whole group, not to make a big issue of it, but to find a time, say, hey, I need to talk to you, and end it there. You'll be happier. You'll go home and still have the rest of your vacation time saved, maybe get a refund, and
Right.
you'll have left a group of people with a good impression of who you are as well. Because as we all know, you may meet up with those people in some other circumstance at some other time. So
Yeah,
you don't
and I
want to
know
leave a bad impression of yourself.
right. And I know we've done another one of these talks on how to pick a tour guide and how to find the right group for your tours. And so we'll put those at the comments. Folks could go back and listen about that, because there are lots of ways of making sure that you meet your expectations with a group. And then just sort of back to talking to your friends and family or whoever you're planning a trip with. I did want to just share that sometimes this is very eye-opening. I mean, I've had long-time friends that when we finally traveled together, I learned things about them that I never knew. And some of it's like, oh, wow, we have very different styles about that, didn't realize that. Or I learned that, we're really close and we become closer because of the time together.
Right.
That's one of the things I like about family tours and trips that I take with family members is it's sort of like incubates us all together for a few days, and you just sort of marinate together, and you learn a lot about them, even though maybe you've kind of grown apart or you live in different states now. Taking a trip with like sisters or parents, or I know you do that with your family. Like, it's really lovely to be able to put all of that time together, but at the same time we have to put boundaries up for ourselves.
Yeah, it's good to be able to take the trips together, and you can, someone that you didn't know very well. I know myself too, for people that have a prospective partner or they're dating someone, you go on a trip, and that, to me, that's like kind of sometimes the make or break, like, oh, wow,
Right.
like, I know this is more going to be, we're going to be great friends, but we're not going to be lifelong, partners or even friends. You can have friends that you're comfortable going to movies with or coffee, but, we're just not good at, taking a trip or sharing a room together or it just depends.
And that's absolutely happened to me. They're good friends, but they're not somebody I would choose to travel with again, because we've traveled together and it's not we don't share enough of our travel style. And so that becomes an issue. And I think sharing a room is a topic I wanted to talk about too, because as a tour guide, and I know you have this issue where people always want their own room. And it's probably because they've had an experience that wasn't so wonderful sharing a room with someone. Right. But I honestly enjoy sharing a room with another person, even if I don't know them, because again, you get a real opportunity to get to know someone. You get to share the cost, which is a huge benefit. And there's a lot of beautiful things that can happen when you share a room. It's like that quiet time when you're getting ready in the morning or at the end of the evening to just sort of talk about things. You get one-on-one time with somebody who you normally wouldn't. Now, hopefully this person isn't a horrible human being and you're having a miserable time, because I've seen that happen too. But for the most part, in my experiences, sharing a room with somebody, a complete stranger, has turned out to be a really wonderful experience for me. I know we've talked that I stay in hostels a lot, and so lots of times I'm sharing a room with either 6 or 8 or 16 people.
Oh, wow.
And I've met some amazing people through that, just sitting around, getting ready. Hey, how are you? How was your day? In a hostel,
Right.
we're not sharing our tours or our day together, but we are sharing the room.
Right.
So you just get to talking about, what did you do today? How did that go? Um, how long are you staying? And you become friends with somebody who you never thought you'd be friends with. So I really do appreciate the sharing a room together experience, even if we're not sharing a tour together.
Oh
Um,
yeah, definitely. I
and the
highly recommend, yeah, sharing a room or being open to it, especially if you are doing like even a group tour. I know many years ago there was a trip I saw on Meetup of all places, and Meetup's been a great place for me to meet a lot of like-minded friends and relationships. And I reached out to a women's group and said, "Hey, I would like to go to, there's this trip going to this place." And this woman said, "Sure, I'll do it." So we met at the airport and then we shared a room and we've become the best of friends. And it's all because we both took a chance, took an opportunity, and I think really communicated with each other, maybe just via email a few days prior, like, this is, and I'm not even sure we did that much, but just I think we went into the trip with the right mind frame of we want to meet someone new, and what a
right.
lovely experience you can have in conversations.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a good point, April. Like, don't make that one negative experience that went wrong, deter you from sharing a room in the future, because there are so many great experiences that come from that. And even though we're talking about all this, pre-trip conversation that you can have with your fellow travelers, you can also do that on, the very first couple of days you're in that room with your new
Right.
roommate, is just to set the expectation of how you want your trip to go and what you're willing to do, and being respectful of their early rising or staying up, and just making sure that we're both on the same page. And if
Yeah.
you're on a group tour, if you're having trouble with your roommate, tell the tour guide right away. So if they're not
Right.
being respectful and they're not doing what's needed, you don't need to suffer in silence. It's very important that you raise your hand and say, "This isn't working, please help me." Most tour guides like us, we want you to have a beautiful experience. So we're going to do whatever is possible. It may not be possible to change your room today or tomorrow, but if we can adjust it or even have a conversation with that person to try to improve your situation, for sure, that's in our best
Oh,
interest to help you
exactly.
do that.
Oh,
So
exactly. Yeah.
I'm glad we got to
And you
talk.
mentioned the hostels, and I think that's the hostels are great places. Even bed and breakfast. I think that's one thing I like about bed and breakfast as well is, and some people are like, "Ooh, a bed and breakfast. I might have to eat breakfast with other people." But it's like, oh my gosh, I've had such amazing conversations at the shared breakfast table, and I almost prefer that because some bed and breakfast will set up individual tables if they have room.
Right.
Others, I like the communal table because you go to breakfast, you never know who you might get a chance to talk to. I've met authors, I've met, mothers and people traveling from other countries, and just the stories and just even tidbits like, what did you do? Like you mentioned, like, what did you do today? And you find out about maybe little nooks and crannies of a town or an area that you didn't know existed, and you wouldn't have found out about had you not had that beautiful conversation over coffee at breakfast. So I would
Yeah.
highly encourage, yeah, bed and
Yeah.
breakfast, hostels, that shared environment is wonderful.
It is. And I think that that's something that's beautiful about travel, is you kind of, in order to really enjoy your travel experience, you have to open yourself up to those experiences. And I know as you were talking, I know some folks, again, they're not into the hostel experience, or they don't think they would like that communal breakfast thing. And you're not alone. We all are just a little uncomfortable when when I walk into that room, and I've stayed in hostels, as I said, that have like 16 or so people in there, 8 to 10 or more bunk beds. So we're sharing this room with, men and women, and you walk in, and I too feel uncomfortable. Everyone does. Like the first few minutes, you're like, oh, I don't know any of these people. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to react. Like, is this going to be okay? But after a few minutes, people are wonderful, right? Most of the time, it's a great experience. People are respectful. Yes, you have a few moments of not so great, but I tell you, those are typically just good stories.
Yeah.
And then that communal breakfast or lunch or eating experience in hostels and bed and breakfasts is we all feel uncomfortable, right? You have to go sit at
Right,
this table and
exactly.
other
Yeah.
people are sitting and eating, and you're just like, everyone has that moment. But I do think once you get past that moment, that is when the beautiful things start to happen. And when you're
Right.
traveling, putting yourself out there and putting yourself in foreign experiences is part of what's happening. And those are great experiences to encourage people to do, whether you're traveling alone or whether you're traveling with a group of people. Making sure that you
Right.
venture out of your comfort zone a little bit and enjoy that experience.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so we're getting close to the end here, April. Did you have a story of a time when, I know you mentioned earlier that you've made some really wonderful friends when you were traveling? You talked about your meetup experience.
Yeah, the meetup experience. I've also just I wasn't sure about taking a big group bus tour with even though there were some family members on it, but again, just opening yourself up and realize. I mean, travel is an adventure, and I think that needs to be your thought going into even meeting other people. Is this is an adventure, and who knows who I might get to meet, and they're just as uncomfortable or unsure about being in that situation, meeting new people sometimes, and just to be open and be friendly and put a smile on, and there's going to be some awkwardness, but you really are going to have an incredible an incredible experience, I think, when you open yourself to travel and to being travel through people as well. So
Right. Yeah. And I know I've had a couple of experiences just in the last couple of years where I've traveled with groups, and people that I knew ahead of time. We've met and, we were friends, kind of go out to dinner, go out to lunch friends, and then we ended up on a trip together. And those friends have become so much better friends because we've had that experience, and we realized that we liked similar things. We realized we had a similar style. So, getting that chance to travel with somebody, even who was kind of a peripheral friend, just somebody who I sort of knew,
right.
but they weren't very close. After traveling together, we are wonderful friends. And as I said before, hostels and those other group experiences, I can name about 6 people that I have met and we're friends still today that I've met in hostels.
Oh,
Um,
really?
just over like that group meal or sitting across on bunk beds together, or that kind of thing, where we just started talking and now we're still friends, years later. And some of those folks, matter of fact, all of those folks don't live anywhere near Los Angeles, so I don't get to see them. We just have to be friends. And I've visited them when I've traveled. Um,
Oh, wow.
and the
Oh,
same
that's
thing,
wonderful.
I've had people stay here at my house who I've met through that as well. So it's kind of a neat experience. It just sort of opens you up to different experiences. Like you said, it's traveling through people. So traveling with others, you really get to travel through people, through their
Yeah,
eyes, or
right,
meeting different
right.
people as you're going along. So,
Yeah,
so I think we can probably pause here and let it open up for questions.
yeah.